Name me a country in the world that doesn't think we're the leading nation in the world. Without America, not a joke, think about it. I'm being literal. Who could lead the world other than the United States of America? Well, guess what? America's winning, and the world's better off for it.
Okay, so apparently I must have missed this, Tony Shaffer. Welcome to the show. But I guess maybe in Article 0.5 or something of the Constitution, it says that whoever we elect president, of course, is president of the world. And maybe I missed something there, but, I have some trouble with the person in the White House or wanting to run for the White House is no longer the case with Biden, but now Kamala Harris, is that the Democratic Party, and you're going to see some sound clips that we have going back here for quite a number of years. I think they think that they're supposed to run the world, not just the United States. And I have a big problem with that.
So I'm trying to figure out what exactly we won. Did you get something in the mail? I didn't see anything in the mail.
I don't know. I checked earlier today. Maybe it's coming tomorrow, but I still don't have anything.
I looked at my porch, and sometimes, they drop stuff off. It wasn't there either. So I'm trying to figure out what exactly we won. And I'm a believer in the founding fathers. I think we need to, as George Washington said, stay out of foreign entanglements. Man, oh man, are we in the middle of a lot of them. And I think that's something you and I both share to, for those we advised, it's like, we don't need to do this. This is not in anybody's interest. But I think notably, who exactly was Biden speaking to? So, Danny, I don't think he was speaking to the American people, because I think most Americans look at this like, did I get something in the mail? What did I win? Nobody's winning here except those who are the neocons who are seeking, I wouldn't even call it global engagement. I would call it, I'll be blunt, global warfare. For some reason, the neocons, aka the Trotskyites, seem to believe that using warfare, human conflict, is a viable method of pushing for global control. And that's what he was talking about. He was pretty blunt about that. This is, we are the nation that runs the planet. And I'm pretty sure the Chinese don't agree with that. I'm pretty sure the Russians don't agree with that. I think that's where there's this thing called BRICS that's kind of up and coming. The non-aligned nations are getting together. And we should be, I'll say it as clearly as I can based on a lot of our mutual friends, the late Walter Jones, Representative Walter Jones, who was a friend and mentor. We should be, as a nation, the best friend that people can rely upon, but are never told what to do. That if you leave us alone, if you leave with us alone, we leave you alone. There you go. We need to be out of any foreign entanglements, which then drain for no viable or sustainable purpose our blood and treasure. And yet, Danny, we were involved in Iraq for decades. We're still there using blood and treasure. Our old stomping grounds, Afghanistan. Imagine this: over 20 years and $1 trillion, and then we're just going to walk away. Good luck, all you girls who we built schools for. Yeah. We really like you, but we don't like you enough to actually protect you. So there you go. Democrats, just say it. I don't mean to be political, but for those of us who thought it was a bad idea to go in there and nation build, which Operation Dark Heart, that's my premise. We should have gone in there, we kicked their butt, and leave, or leave a little bit behind to do special operations stuff. But we should never have done nation building. That was a huge mistake. But okay, once you do it, you've made that investment, and to make the investment, to walk away blindly and just we're not that was the wrong answer as well.
Yeah, so, it's funny, you wrote the book on it. I wrote a pamphlet in 2009 saying nearly the same thing. It was called "Go Big or Go Deep," and whether Obama should have done the surge or done what you suggest, which is special forces kind of thing. So it wasn't quite up to your level, but it's the same kind of premise there. Yeah. But, and what I want to talk about here on the show today is almost, in some ways, it seems contradictory, but they are both concurrently existing. And it's important to point these things out. Number one is that we think we're the global masters, that we can run the show. And then the second is, can we run anything? And the one thing that puts these seemingly contradictory things together is this near addiction, almost like a drug addiction to the use of military
Yeah.
power at the absence of intellectual capacity onto how to
Right.
do what you suggested about how we should live in the world, be everybody's best friend that wants to, and only kill anyone who tries to harm us. And I don't have any
Right.
problem doing that. But what I do have a great deal of problem is to go out looking for enemies to slay. So I want to set the stage just a little bit with a couple of other things. Now I'm going to several things I've got from Biden here, but they're symptomatic of the Democratic Party. And as we'll see later, it's not just the Democratic Party. It's this elite that you talked about. There's some of those in both parties. But this is real symptomatic. So first of all, I want to jump back to October 2023, shortly after the terrible terrorist attack that Israel suffered. And Biden was asked on 60 Minutes, can we keep helping Ukraine to the level we have, and now also help Israel with some of the same kinds of weapons and ammunition? And watch his answer.
We're the United States of America, for God's sake. The most powerful nation in the history, not in the world, in the history of the world. The history of the world.
See, that my problem is I think he believes that we have no limits to anything. We can do whatever we want. So if I want to go and kill people over there, or provide weapons to help someone kill people over here, or go into the Indo-Pacific, which we can also talk about doing, or stay in the Middle East like we've been doing with Syria, Iraq, and all these other places, he believes that. And when you have that mentality that we're the greatest in the history of the world and there are no limits to our power, you have a chance to make a lot of mistakes.
Well, I think that's the issue. So after World War II, the concept of being unprepared for a Pearl Harbor type attack was paramount. The idea was to never be in a position where we were unable to pick up on indications and warning. And you and I came up through this. Remember EWIOH, early warning indications of hostilities. Remember, we were taught that as young lieutenants regarding being aware for that. And obviously, the concept of preventing strategic surprise was the basis for our military, for much of our intelligence community. And then having a permanent military that, frankly, people wouldn't mess with, starting with Eisenhower, the New Look, that was basically a nuclear heavy force, minimizing conventional forces. It didn't work out quite so well, but I understood the concept. The idea was let's have such an overwhelming nuclear deterrence that nobody will dare do anything. Well, great concept. It didn't work in practice. So we had to go back to the drawing board. And then you had people dragging us in. From Eisenhower on, you had people dragging us back into small conflicts. From Kennedy to LBJ, Nixon finally got us out of Vietnam to get us back into the Middle East. We have a record of doing this where I think we feel that we need to be involved militarily. And I look back on it as a historian, political scientist, and retired Army officer. It's like, why? What did we actually gain from all of these interventions relating to either military supremacy or prestige nationally? And and one of the great ironies here, and I'm going to say this with all due love to Vietnam, I buy stuff made in Vietnam all the time. Gee, couldn't we have just avoided the war and became friends with them instead of having the war? I mean, I don't understand why we had to have the war before we became commercially and diplomatically friendly with them. We could have avoided the war, all that death, and just had a relationship. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do actually. When Trump went to Vietnam in 2018, I think it was, to meet with Kim Jong-un, we thought maybe he was going to have some kind of a big deal. I actually went there to kind of help cover some of that and do some talking with some media folks or whatever. And it did occur to me at that time that I'm like, here I am in Saigon, in the place where all this war took place.
Ho Chi Minh City.
And now for what purpose? I mean, what did all those men die for when I'm here? Or we could have done it the way you said, and we would still be there, but all those people would never have been blown up. And it's just absurd.
And apparently the North Vietnamese wanted to make overtures to us. They didn't want the war, just saying. So,
So now then let's jump forward to this past April. Where Biden is again. I think that the context is he's talking about the Russia-Ukraine war, but he lays out again the mentality that basically says we're running the show for everybody. Watch this.
Yeah.
We don't walk away from our allies. We stand with them. We don't let tyrants win. We oppose them. We don't merely watch global events unfold. We shape them. That's what it means to be the indispensable nation. That's what it means to be the world's superpower and the world's leading democracy.
So
that's
he's
what it is
going
to be a
back
bully.
well, yeah, that's in practice. He's going back to the Clinton administration, and then his Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, who've made famous this indispensable nation thing, and it's been going on ever since. But you see, that's a Democratic mentality that they keep going back to. But yeah, it's that not just that we should be everybody's best friend if we can and stay out of foreign entanglements. It's that we seek entanglements to tell everybody what to do or bully, as you say. And that's just not effective.
It's called the white man's burden, Danny. Did you know that? I'm not joking. This has been around for a while. This goes back before our generation. It's the white man's burden. We must solve the problems of the world. Oh, by the way, the British had that white man's burden before we got it. We must have caught it from them after we ended World War II, since FDR ended their empire. I guess that can I say booger? That booger got stuck on us because we seem to be the ones now doing it. And yeah, look, let's talk about what Joe Biden said there. The Maidan coup was a coup. It was the technical term is color revolution. And it was orchestrated by the United States. Victoria Nuland, she was there. They got her on tape. I'm not talking conspiracy. I'm talking about her proudly demonstrating the might of the United States to upend legitimately elected governments.
Yes.
So that's why he's saying we own this. Well, technically, yeah, I guess you do, but you shouldn't. We shouldn't be there. I'm not saying we shouldn't be a helpful neighbor. I know Donald Trump was trying to help the Ukrainian people before the Russian invasion, but I do agree with what Trump says. Putin wouldn't have done it. They would have found a way to talk through this and avoid the escalation that went to the point of where you have war. Now, by the way, I think Biden brought this on. Biden actually said publicly about 2 months before the Russian incursion, "Oh, if they just take a little bit, we're fine with that." I mean, who says that, Danny? Really, who says that?
Right. In fact, actually, that's good you bring that up, because we actually have a clip here from what Trump said, where he was talking about here's how he kind of view things. Now I'll preface this by saying I don't just say yes, all the Democrats are bad and Trump is
no, I don't either.
He's really good in some areas, though. This is one of them. Watch this.
We're going to return the world to peace. And mostly I can do it with a telephone call. We don't have to send troops. I can do it with a telephone call. I talked this world out of a lot of wars with telephone calls. I don't have to send in the troops.
Yeah, I truly do believe that when Trump brags about a lot of things, but one of the things I think he's correct on is that if he had been in the White House in February 2022, there would not have been a war, because he desires to avoid those kinds of things. And instead, and I'll just tell you, I got this on, I guess, secondhand information from a diplomat that's very good friends of the United States, that told me that when Putin and Biden met in June of 2021, that Putin frankly told him, if you keep going with NATO in Ukraine, I'm going to go to war. And that Biden reportedly told him, okay, do whatever you think, but we'll crush you because we're a lot bigger than you, instead of saying, all right, what can we do to avoid this? That's the problem.
Yeah. And the Russians have been very clear about their red lines. And I don't want your audience to think that I'm somehow pro-Putin, but I do understand, after studying the Russian issues and the Cold War, what they're concerned about. The Russian people, for better or for worse, they're fundamentally paranoid. They've been invaded for like 1,000 years. So they kind of, this is a sensitive issue. And so when you start looking at it's not about how we perceive it. It's like, oh, we're NATO and we're good. It's like, yeah, they don't see us that way. And at this point, I don't know if I necessarily see NATO as all that positive based on some of the knucklehead stuff they're doing. And by the way, my solution to this, Danny, you want to hear what my solution is to solve all this?
Yep.
You ready for it? Ask NATO to join. Ask Russia to join NATO. That would solve it. Everybody's got Article 5. Nobody can invade anybody, right? Seems to solve it.
Well, okay. Anything that's going to solve it, I'm all for it. It's interesting.
Sure, I am serious as a heart attack. It's like,
and there were many people I remember, because I actually first, I got out of the military for a period of time, kind of in the middle of my career. It was a little odd path, but while I was out, I was a low-level aide, Senate aide for Senator Kay Bailey Hutchinson of Texas, who at that time was very much opposed to NATO expansion, and so I had joined her staff because of those views and was helping along with those. And I'll never forget that we were talking about at the time all the consequences that could come, and a lot of people were discussing, well, maybe we should invite Russia into NATO, and of course that was rejected out of hand. Even though people are going, now wait, I mean, if they're on the same side, no one's going to be fighting anybody. But
exactly,
yeah, and that was, and now we
and by the way, if I'm asked, if I by some miracle get asked to do something in a new Trump administration, first thing I'm going to do, hey, just knock on the door, say, hey, let's all be friends. Let's figure out a way to remove any concern you and Russia have regarding Russian nations invading you. If someone invades you, all the other NATO nations have to come to your aid, right? Wouldn't that's the true Article 5, right? I'm not joking. I am not. I know it's funny because this is so radical.
Yeah.
A radical solution is the best one. Just say.
And it's just, I guess part of the reason I'm laughing is because I had John Mearsheimer on the show earlier today, who came to a very nearly similar thing. He said he thinks whether it's an epiphany from Harris or a Biden or Trump administration, what we should do is right away end this war as fast as possible, and then start to reestablish relations with Russia,
of course,
because that's in our long-term interest. Yeah. So,
by the way, let me hit this real quick because people don't seem to understand this. There's 3 reasons we have inflation. One of the reasons we're having inflation is because of the sanctions on Putin. What happens when you lose Russia? Russia produces a lot of things, rare earths, a number of other things. They're a big a gas tank. What do they call that? The derisive thing? Oh, they're a country.
A gas tank with nukes.
The gas, yeah. So yeah, kind of, maybe. But my point is that because of all these sanctions, Danny, they've actually harmed the global economy, which has caused inflation. Second thing, when you involve yourself in depleting the number of access points for oil, you then expand and increase the price of oil globally, which is another thing that's hurting our economy. Right now, gas is still double the price. So that causes inflation because there's downstream effects of having more expensive energy. So those are 2 things that, in addition to the Green New Deal, which, by the way, we could talk about another day because Inflation Reduction Act, same thing. It's the same thing. That by dumping $270 billion into the economy with no ability to actually control where it goes or what happens to it, those are the things which have caused this continued inflation. So, but we have brought the inflation on ourselves by these sanctions on Putin. By the way, Putin's gotten past the sanctions. They're doing just fine. Their economy's growing.
Right. Yeah. Unlike our side. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about the practical ramifications of having the mentality that we're supposed to run everything. And one of the things that is perversely true, simultaneous to thinking that we run the show and that we need to tell everybody what to do, it's that we don't have the ability to make good on it. And I know you and I may have some difference of opinion on some of the things in the Middle East, but for the moment, I'm not going to talk about the policies so much as the administration is doing. And so we have overtly said that, we're behind Israel and whatever they want to do is fine. And then we're for a 2-state solution. We want a ceasefire immediately. And then when Netanyahu just blows through that, it publicly humiliates Biden, instead of doing anything about it or using this power that we have, we just kowtow to him. Now then we have apparently Zelensky going into Russia, and at least publicly they're claiming that we didn't know anything about it. And some of the Americans are saying the same thing. Not sure who to believe on that, but I do see that Zelensky and Netanyahu, some of our allies, can pretty much do whatever they want to do, and we seem to be powerless to stop it while we're trying to tell Russia and China what to do. This contradiction is nothing but expensive and causing us trouble.
I agree. So let me hit the Middle Eastern thing. I don't think we're that far apart on Middle East stuff as you might think. I don't believe for a minute that we are playing our cards correctly to bring that to an end. I think the Biden administration is happy to say one thing and do something completely different behind the scenes because they're right now trying to obtain as my friend Blaine Holt says, 3-state solution. Their three-state solution is Minnesota, Wisconsin, and
Right.
Michigan.
Right. Well said.
That's
Yeah.
that's their three-state solution. So everything they're doing
All
reflects
right. That's good.
we
Yeah.
want to publicly not offend the Jews, but we want to privately support Hamas and say, "Oh no, don't worry, we're." So that's why you see the chaos. So it's not so much either side getting up and over either the Israelis or Hamas. They're just simply taking advantage of the space we're giving them because of the obvious duplicity. The thing you said, they see exactly what you said. They know that this administration has no core ethics or values, so they're going to both take advantage of it. Why would they not? People
Yeah.
have to understand that the world is not
Right.
a pleasant place.
Right.
But people don't like playing by the rules if they know they don't have to, and they're not. So you have someone like Biden who will say this hugely, oh, we're the I'm the guy that beat Corn Pop, and it's like they look at him as like, sure you did, bub, and they go off and do their own thing. So both the Israelis and Hamas are guilty of that. Just saying. And
Yeah.
so I'm
And,
just,
and
you
you
know,
can,
and this past week, this past weekend, for those who follow me on Newsmax, I was asked on Saturday on Rita Cosby's show, well, Tony Blinken saying the ceasefire agreement's close. Like, it's not. No, it's not going to happen. I said I'm going on record right now. I will forecast you will see nothing in the way of agreement. Not this weekend, not next week, because no one takes Blinken seriously, and everybody sees advantage of not reaching an agreement right now. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And here we are.
yeah.
We're on Thursday, and it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen this week. It's not going to happen next week. Just saying.
Yeah, because there's too many people that don't want it to happen.
Exactly.
Now let me introduce another problem. Okay, so we've been talking about Biden, but obviously he's no longer on the ticket. It's going to be Harris, and so the question is going to be, with all of this power, if Kamala Harris wins, is she going to be powerful enough and strong enough intellectually and even constitutionally, if that's a word I can use, to stand up to whether it's Putin, Xi Jinping, Netanyahu, Zelensky, to hold fast to the interest of the United States? I'm going to give you a hint here. This is an interview from almost 2 years ago by Andrea Mitchell and Kamala Harris, and watch the very specific questions that are asked, and then we'll just watch the rest.
Yeah.
This is becoming a war of attrition. Doesn't Vladimir Putin have more ammunition, more artillery to outlast Ukraine?
Well, you're right, Andrea, that Vladimir Putin decided, unprovoked, to start this war. And he has the ability to end it by stopping and getting out.
He's shown no sign of giving up or negotiating.
Well, that is a part of why we will make sure that we do everything possible within our power to strengthen Ukraine's position on the battlefield, so that if and when there are negotiations, Ukraine will be in the strongest position in a negotiation.
Will the American people be willing, especially with a Republican majority now in the House, will they be willing to stand up for Ukraine and make sacrifices?
I know the American people. I know who we are. And I've seen how the American people feel about this. I've seen it traveling all over our country, to places you might not imagine, where Ukrainian flags are flying in their windows. I know the American people feel a sense of moral outrage and a sense of responsibility for our nation to stand with the Ukrainian people around these atrocities, and I'm confident in that. I'm confident in that.
Okay, several things I want to point out about that. First of all, Andrea Mitchell asked the perfect question at the outset of that. Okay, Russia has more men, ammunition, natural resources that you mentioned here. How can Ukraine stand up against that when we can't match that? And she not only didn't answer it, but you could see she's thinking in slow motion and then starts talking about something completely different and never circle back to answer the question. And Andrea Mitchell tried to get back on there, but that's just an interview. What's going to happen when you're actually, if she should actually win, or even if Biden doesn't even make it to January, which I think is actually a possibility too, And now that she's facing a Xi Jinping or a Vladimir Putin, how is she going to stand up to that pressure?
They're going to eat her lunch. There's no soft answer I can give on this, Danny. One of the notable things that many leaders come to the table with, and left or right, is a sense of history, of understanding context. And let's face it, she's unbound by any context of any sort because she's let go of the past, as she always tells people. And that's not a good thing, because you have to understand the past to actually establish your philosophy of how to deal with the present relating to leaders. I'm a Reagan guy. I've talked about this on your show and other shows. Bud McFarland, God rest his soul, was one of my friends and mentors. I learned how the Reagan team did things, and they always focused on understanding the deeper cultural and specific military issues of a given nation, to include leaders. And that's why Reagan was able to play Gorbachev so well. It wasn't about Russia, United States. It was about Reagan and Gorbachev. And I think that's what Kamala lacks. That Trump has. Trump has that. Trump understands how to cut it, how to go and do business, cut a deal. And again, Kamala doesn't. She was literally spouting the neocon talking points in that interview. Oh, we're just going to do whatever we need to. It's like, it's not that easy. And the other thing that she seemed to not understand is that Russia never gave up its fundamental control of certain elements of its economy. Now, that is to say that the Russians are a republic. They do have elections. They maintained some level of contingency and control over industry. So while we are remaining unable to produce, for example, 155 millimeter artillery rounds to the level of to keep up with what Ukrainian needs, the Russians have surpassed it an order of magnitude, because they always maintain some level of industrial control. So as long as you got that, they're always going to outproduce you. And Russia, even with Europe, you're never going to have the number of resources available to counter what Russia can do. Russia never gave up on having a potential to quickly switch to a wartime economy, and it's paying dividends. You didn't see her talk about that at all. She didn't talk about the human cost. But one of the things I believe, I know this may sound weird, I am fundamentally against war. I'm anti-war, having seen what damage it does to both individuals engaged in it and nations who have to come through it. There's no reason to go to war if you don't have to. Right. And at this point, the idea that, oh, we're just going to let attrition take its course, they're going to bleed Ukraine dry. You're going to lose a whole generation of Ukrainian men for no good reason. And I think she's just fine with that.
Yeah, and I'm going to touch on that point in just a second. But this other thing from that clip that I wanted to talk about was that she's talking about, I know the American people, and they feel a sense of moral obligation to keep supporting Ukraine for as long as it takes to match our talking points here. But if you look at recent reporting, Gary, if you can bring that one from the Responsible Statecraft up, that's very recent, and maybe even been out yesterday. Yeah, yesterday. A July poll shows that a majority of American public does not support sending U.S. troops to defend Taiwan or Ukraine. And then you keep going down there that list, and there's lots of other things that we're not wanting to fight. It's as though a lot of Americans agree with you that they don't want to fight wars, that they don't want wars to be fought on their behalf or to pay for them. So it seems to me that the administration is out of step with the American people as well on this point.
They are. And there's two reasons why they are. Now, to the point you just made, Danny, I think I live in northern North Carolina, rural North Carolina. It's a poor community. It is. Eastern North Carolina is not a rich place. And so when poor people see we're spending $19 billion on helping the Ukrainian people, they ask, why? Why are we doing that? And I know there's a big battle right now going on in the 1st Congressional District, because the Democrat, I'm not making this political, but I'm saying the Democrat who is here has voted over and over to support sending money overseas to these people with no good idea of what's going to come out of it. So people of both sides that I talk to, both political parties locally, are fed up with it. Nobody likes it. So that's the first thing. And secondly, the reason they continue to do it is because it benefits their rich friends. Eisenhower warned us of the military-industrial congressional complex. And this is another place where the dirty little secret, which I think Jake Sullivan even said at one point, "Oh, well, most of that money's being spent here." Yeah, it's going to
Yeah.
Raytheon, Boeing, and all these other arms manufacturers. When you
Well, and then
you and I both
to your
know,
to your point, to that point, and the one you made just a second
yeah,
ago,
there you go.
and that this is not a partisan issue.
No.
It's an elite issue. Here's Lindsey Graham a couple of days ago gleefully talking about how we should definitely support more war in Russia.
Yeah.
The weapons that they're using here are made in America, creating American jobs. And every weapon we give the Ukrainians are used to full effect. We've learned a lot about our own weapon system by providing them to the Ukrainians, what works and what doesn't. So I'm hoping that in December we can have another infusion of weapons provided by the United States to help the Ukrainians fight in 2025.
So I'm going to ask you two questions based on that comment there. Number one, based on where you're at, you just mentioned your local area here.
Yeah.
Is that message going to resonate with people in your district that we want another batch, another round of money in our weapon systems to go to Ukraine? What is the benefit for them?
Not a darn thing. So, by the way, Danny, do you know how to fly an F-16? I hear there's a job for F-16 pilots. Just
I've heard that. Yeah. No, I have to brush up on my piloting skills, but my
So no, it's not playing here. So despite what Kamala Harris says about the American being fourth, nobody. I've spoken to a lot of people. Was there enthusiasm at one point for the Ukrainian effort? Yeah, everybody had their little Ukrainian flags out, but it's kind of like I don't think they understood context, and as more people understand, it's like, hey, we kind of did that. That's kind of our fault. It's like, okay, we need to get out of this, and I think that's where most people are at. And again, just looking at the cost, we're spending money we don't have. One of the things which has also caused our economy to be full of inflated, is the printing of money. So we're literally printing money now. Think about this as an objective fact. Over the past 3 years, Danny, the value of whatever you have, whatever you're paid, has dropped by almost 1/3. Between 20 and 30% of inflation has decreased the buying power of our money across the board, and that's partly because we are printing all this money to pay for these things that we don't need, to include all this money going to Ukraine. The more you print, the less value your currency has, because you've just basically taken the bottom out of it. And that's what the American people, I think, are pretty fed up with. And again, I just don't think I think people are starting to wake up to the fact there is a link between all of this unbridled spending and all this quote unquote foreign aid that really doesn't aid anybody except I think those who make the weapons.
Yeah, except that the picture Gary showed, which leads me to the second question I wanted to ask you about that. His implication that he didn't specifically state, but implied that if we give them this money, that's going to make a difference on the battlefield. But from a military perspective, if Graham got triple what he wanted to get, is Russia going to lose the war next year because of it?
No. So again, I need to preface this. I'm not pro-Putin. I'm pro-reality, because there's nothing we've done. There's nothing that's been introduced either by concept or by actual deployment that has made any difference in deterring or defeating Putin. Not a darned thing. Nothing. Not a thing. Nothing from the vaunted F-16s, which they still can't find pilots for, to the introduction of all these advanced. No, I mean, come on. It's like, oh, those F-16s, we're going to get them there. It's like, oh, I guess we can someone fly them? I mean,
they flew them in the parade, I've noticed, but I haven't seen them in combat yet.
You're not going to see them in combat, because nobody in their right mind is going to fly those things in front of the anyway. But my point being is that not a thing we've deployed, not a thing we contemplate, not a thing that we would send would have any difference. The Russians have introduced an effective strategy, as our friends Alex and Alexander call aggressive attrition. They basically Russians have figured out, these guys are stupid. We're just going to let them keep coming at us. We're going to weaken them. We're going to weaken them. Then we're going to move forward. And it's like this whole incursion into Kursk. You've been covering that quite well, I might add. It's like, all you've done is opened a fifth front. You've depleted Donbass, and the Russians are just kind of waltzing village to village now, taking over. It's like, did you really think that, the Russians are going to, they're going to pull people out of Donbass? Like, no, They're an order of magnitude bigger than you. They're going to take them out of some other place and bring them down. They don't need to deplete anything they've already got in the theater. They've got 10 times more than you got. They're just going to bring in things from other places. Oh, by the way, they're going to let you stay there as long as you want until you're all dead. So there you go. I just don't know how people don't figure this out.
Yeah, I probably because of comments like Graham and Biden keep making here. I mentioned a second ago that that we had a chance to avoid this war at the beginning if we'd used negotiations,
No
but
doubt.
Biden was not willing to do that. Now I want to show you why this mentality is so pernicious. I think we opened the show with the scene from Monday from the Democratic National Convention. I'm going to show you something from the 2016 Democratic National Convention, which was not very far before this war kicked off, and watch what Biden said then.
We do not scare easily. We never bow. We never bend. We never break when confronted with crisis. We are America, second to none, and we own the finish line. Don't forget it.
See, and now that he took that 4 years later into that discussion with Putin. So he said, incredibly important there, we don't even bend. He said, now you can't engage in any kind of negotiations or talking to anybody to find some kind of middle ground if you don't at least bend a little bit. And that's exactly what he did on that conversation. I think Putin expected him to at least bend over to him so that he would have some reason not to engage in a war. But Biden wasn't willing to do any of that. Neither was NATO. And so that is why it is so dangerous, I think. And so here's the question now. Biden's about to go off the stage here. But Kamala Harris seems to have the same mentality because here's the thing. What Biden said it, but it sure wasn't Biden alone who wrote it then or in this particular one here. This is something that the Democratic Party seems to follow, or really the elite as well. So let me not limit it to them. But when you hear those kinds of things and you see how they physically manifest on the ground, what are your concerns about where this war is going in the new administration, if it's Harris?
To start off with Biden's comments, and I think Secretary Gates said that Joe Biden's been on the wrong side of every major decision in the past 30 years, maybe more. And this is another one where Biden somehow thought by bellicose language and empty rhetoric, he was going to deter Putin. And maybe that's what he thought. I think maybe in a way he wanted the war. I think Biden wanted the war. I think he was talking tough because I think he wanted to have the conflict now we have. And I think those who knew that there are red lines. And by the way, have you noticed they keep talking about, and Zelensky in particular is saying, oh, there's no red lines now. It's like, yeah, they're red lines. Yeah. You crossed one regarding the whole, when you decided to violate the basic agreement that regarding the Maidan agreement and the things that led up to that, then you're going to have war. And the Russians are serious about this. Putin is serious about this. And by the way, did you notice the new narrative is that the reason that Zelensky, let me just say this and it may get you in trouble. I hope not. The reason Zelensky invaded, no, this is something that I don't want to get you in trouble with your audience. Zelensky invaded to try to gain control of the power plants, the nuclear power plant in Kursk, as well as the nuclear stocks that are kept there. That's what the objective was. Nobody wants to talk about it because, oh my God, an ally trying to grab nuclear weapons, that's unheard of. They don't want to talk about that. That's what he tried to do. He tried to grab those things for purposes of leverage. Well, he failed, but he's trying to say, oh, no, it's just for purposes of negotiations. No, it's not. And I think one of the things that he said recently was that there's no red lines. There are red lines, Mr. Zelensky. You almost crossed one, and it would have been to grave consequences. And I'm sorry,
here's the problem, Tony, is that depending on whose red lines are we talking about, because if he's talking about American red lines, there probably aren't. Because what could he do?
I agree with that.
That's why I worry.
There are no American red lines because he's violated several and nobody does anything. With that said, the Russians have made very clear there are red lines.
Yes.
They've been crossed and there's been consequences. So it's kind of like, dude, don't. And I think Zelensky wants a wider conflict because it gives him a continued power in place. By the way, and let me say this again. I said this on your show last time. Even during the darkest days of World War II, the Civil War, United States always had elections, no matter what. the election of 1864, Danny, right before, during the Civil
Yep,
War.
right.
Everybody thought Lincoln was going to be defeated. He won. We still had the election. And that, by the way, the consequences of that election would have been tremendously one way or another. So I'm just saying, why is Zelensky avoiding having an election if he's so confident in what he's doing to be that is right for the Ukrainian people? Why we support that, I don't know, because that is not, dare I say, democratic, since I hear that from the Democrats all the time.
Right. And here's another consequence that I worry about. We keep talking, and Biden clearly, genuinely believes that we are the most powerful nation in the history of the world to this day, and the world is better off because of what we're doing, and we're winning, as he said on that opening clip. Divorced from all reality, I get it.
Yeah.
But that's still what he's thinking here. But now then you're looking around what's going on. You mentioned a minute ago this BRICS thing coming up, which could have catastrophic results for our economy and our future, et cetera. But you've got Modi, Xi Jinping, Lula, Erdogan, Fico, Orban, all saying, let's go for a negotiated settlement. Let's get this thing off the table. A lot of people are trying to lead in ways to get the war off, and only the United States, or led by the United States, let me not say wrong, led by the United States, we ignore all of that stuff and say, no, Lindsey Graham, just keep shoveling more weapons and bullets and bombs and money, et cetera. And the problem is, I believe we're now heading towards possibly the end game in this war because of this incursion into Kursk, because of the reaction that the Russians are almost certainly going to have, that Ukraine can now lose the war and absolutely physically have their army defeated in the field. What are we going to do then? Because now all these other people, especially Viktor Orban, I think that he's kind of set himself up to be a new Western leader who was trying to do this before it turned into catastrophe. This could be catastrophic for our interests.
It will be, and for the EU and Russia as well. Everybody loses if Ukraine falls. Let me be very clear on this. I don't think for a minute Putin wants Ukraine. He doesn't. He wants those areas which he's in now, Donbass and that that area. Do they want Odessa? Well, maybe. I don't know. It's something that I think we'd have to explore a bit more. But I think that's something of a negotiating position. My point is that nobody wants all of Ukraine except Ukraine, because it's to administer a state like that, you have to be an occupying force. Putin doesn't want that. He doesn't want to be an occupying.
You'd have to have millions of troops to talk
exactly.
It's like, no, territory, and it would never be pacified.
They tried that in Afghanistan. It didn't work. It's like, yeah, we're not going to do that again. So they know. So they want what they have. And by the way, I think Putin will be open to referendums. Let the people vote if they want to stay Ukraine or Russian. I think they were open to that before.
They were. They overtly said it.
Why don't we just sit down as adults and figure this out? Because the Russians aren't going to give up what they believe they rightfully need to control. It's not going to happen. And no amount of wonder weapons or propaganda is going to change that. And I think that the fact that Ukraine falls, I don't think the Russians are going to care, because they're going to have what they want. They're going to let EU kind of, okay, you deal with this EU. You built this, you do it. They'll never let it become NATO, but I think they'd be open to letting it become EU. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
But there's all these things that could and should be worked out before the fall. But if Ukraine falls, I think that the rump state of Ukraine is going to be a drain on everybody. It's going to diminish available food supplies for the third world. It's going to impact oil production. It's going to do all these negative things. So I don't think the Russians want Ukraine to collapse either, but they're not going to back down.
Right. And I want to put this in context. And it just, I mean, this may be self-evident what I'm going to ask here, but I'd still like your view on it. If the United States was attacked by a foreign country and there was, say, 300-400 square kilometers of terrain of South Texas or Arizona that was captured by another country, how willing do you think Washington would be to say, dang it, all right, well, let's negotiate with that power and give them something they want so that they'll leave, as opposed to saying, our hair's on fire, we're going to kill them all? Why do we think that Russia is going to act differently than that?
I don't know. And that's a great question, because we've been attacked a number of times. Heck, remember, there was a guy named Pancho Villa that we were chasing around in Arizona back in the day. You know, I was down there at Fort Huachuca learning about the history of that. So
George Patton, part of that group, by the way.
George Patton, that's right. Blackjack Pershing. So yeah. I'm just saying that that the current U.S. administration has departed from both common sense and any fundamental understanding of human nature, of how nations react to certain circumstance regarding both their culture and traditions. They always don't you always hear they talk about culture and traditions? Oh, this is a breaking from the norms. The current administration breaks from all norms, from all reality.
Yeah.
And I think they do it because they benefit from departing. Again, the U.S. military industrial complex gets a huge amount of money. People like Lindsey Graham retain power. And most of what happens is about helping politicians retain power at this point, because
Yeah.
none of the American people do not benefit at all from this
No.
nonsense.
In the last amount of time we have here, I wonder if I could ask you a
Sure.
related question here. If Harris ends up winning, and right now it's a toss up, it could literally go either way. Who knows how it's going to come out there, but it could go Harris. And I think if it does, I think a lot of the things that we've talked about here are going to manifest in ways that are really, really bad for us over the next 4 years.
Yeah.
We'll see how it turns out. But I don't want to characterize it that if Trump wins, that everything's going to be great, because, and this is where I want your assessment here. I think that we have, as a nation, so damaged our credibility, which you mentioned earlier in this show, that I'm not sure even if Trump comes in and he just says, okay, Tony, I want you to be my right-hand man and you just tell me what to do and I'm going to do everything you suggest and you do a lot of the things we've talked about and they're good. Is Russia going to trust us?
Were you not last meeting with President me? No, I'm just kidding. It's a joke. It's a joke. No, I didn't have this conversation. Well, maybe I did, but let's not get into that. So
plausible deniability. Please continue.
The issue is, even with a good policy, unless you have the personnel to implement that policy, it will fail. And that is a concept that is universal. Personnel or policy, Danny. So to your point, Trump comes in, starts making phone calls. I think he can get things on track pretty quick, but then it becomes the job of those below him, his subordinates, his appointees, to do it. And one of the lessons I learned, and I'm not, I don't think I'm giving away any secrets here. I was, the national security advisor to the Trump 2020 campaign. During that time, before that, I was actually advising Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Joe Dunford, in a nonpartisan group called Team B, which consisted of both Democrats and Republicans. And one of the things I know for a fact, because I talked to both men on this issue, you all probably know which men I'm talking about. Trump gave the direction to leave Syria. Like, we're done. We've done our job there. It's time to go. I know the chairman of the Joint Chiefs said, "Yep, it's time to go," because we're once we put military forces somewhere, they start looking for things to do. You know what? It's true, Danny.
I know
you
what's
put a
coming,
brigade
yeah.
in. Oh, let's go over here and see what trouble we can find. So there you go. So we deployed all these forces to the Middle East, and Trump said, we're exposing ourselves for no good reason. Whatever potential gain there is, it's not worth the investment of blood and treasure. So he directed to get us out. Well, are we out of there, Danny? Are we out of there now?
Nope.
And so as soon as that chairman stepped down, Joe Dunford, Mark Milley decided, F y'all. Can I say that on the air? We ain't leaving. And he and the CENTCOM guys conspired behind Trump's back.
Yep.
Saying,
I wrote about that at the time. It was just livid with
and
that.
I was appalled by it, because I kept trying to say, it's like, hey, they ain't listening to you. It's like, there's nothing there. I'm with you. The previous chairman said the same thing, but these new guys, they ain't playing. And so that's my point to what you're asking. If Trump comes in and decides this is my policy, you cannot simply just leave it to the generals to do it for you, because you can't. Not all generals are created equal. Just saying.
Definitely, that's the case. Well, we'll have to wait and see how this plays out or so. But I just, one of the reasons we just want to do this is, Kamala Harris will be speaking tonight. And so we're going to see, I've talked a lot about what Biden and the Democratic Party has said. We'll see what she actually has to say tonight. And we'll have some analysis on this tomorrow. But, the bigger issue is it's a national problem. And something that is definitely working counterpurpose to the United States, both domestically, economically, and certainly internationally. And we really appreciate you coming on today, giving a lot of clarity to this.
Well, Danny, before we go, I think it's important we address the one thing that could happen if President Trump is elected, is the departure of Barbara Streisand and collapsing of Hollywood. It would be like a black hole. So I think we need to talk about the contingency
Well-
should Babs decide to leave the country. But that's for
Yes.
another day.
Yeah, well, I think we're out of time here to that because
We are
unfortunately,
out of time.
'cause I'd really like to get into that, but anyway, but I always appreciate, always a pleasure to have you on, Tony.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Danny. Always great joining you. Thank you.
And we appreciate you guys coming on too. And like I said, depending on what Kamala Harris says tonight, I'm sure it'll have to say some things about foreign policy. And we'll bring you the so what. What does all that really mean tomorrow in a show? Always, we appreciate you guys coming on. Again, we ask you to like and subscribe, share this with your friends because, folks, we are unintimidated and uncompromised to bring you the truth. And we'll see you tomorrow on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.
Because we have the ability to see what can be, unburdened by what has been,
Oh, man. Gary, you're killing me.
actually happen. Imagine a future, the freight trucks that